National parks have killed nearly 4,500 people in the last 17 years. Today's video is going to be about the most common causes of deaths in national parks and what you can do to survive and prevent them. Now, the most common causes of death are generally between motor accidents and drowning. Different studies will tell you different things. Some will say that drowning is the most common cause, while some will say motor accidents. For instance, the National Forest Service website says motor accidents are the most common cause, while this website I found says that drowning is the most common cause of death. While there's not a lot you can do to prevent getting into a crash besides being a safe driver, there are some things that you can do after you get into a crash. Now, chances are if you get into a crash, you're going to have some kind of medical emergency. So having a first aid kit helps a lot. Your first aid kit should have everything that you could ever need to prevent minor and or major injuries. Meaning you should have gauze, quick clot, tourniquet, band-aids, antiseptic wipes, insect sting relief wipes, a space blanket, splints, so on. Pretty much everything that you can come up with that could be an issue after a car wreck. Keeping a survival kit in your car for after you crash could also be very important. If you think about it, you're going to be in some pretty wild areas. So having the basic essentials like extra clothes, extra food, extra water, a knife, lighters, so on in your truck or car can help with your odds of surviving after a car crash. If you're in an extremely secluded area, you may have to spend a night or two in your car before you can actually get to safety, which is why having extra food, extra water, so on, could be very vital for your ability to survive and make it out of the situation you got yourself into. While it's good to know what to do if you get into a car crash, the best thing you can do is just be a safe driver and never get into a car crash in the first place. The best thing you can do to not end up in a car crash and die is to be aware of your surroundings, constantly scanning the road, and not taking enough drugs to kill a horse and then driving. Doing this will keep you out of that high statistic of being one of the people that dies in a motor accident in national parks. Let's get on to the next subject. The second most common reason people are dying in national parks is drowning. Now, drowning can take place in a lot of different scenarios. Now, if you look into drowning, most drowning cases are not actually because people go for a swim and they don't come back because they drown and they accidentally inhaled water. Most drowning cases actually happen because of accidents prior to them getting into the water, or accidents while they're in the water. This could be shock, it could be a form of damage done to their body, or any other kind of method like that. So in reality, if you don't want to drown, the best thing that you can do is avoid any accidents prior to getting into the water. Now, this could mean that you have to watch out when you're on a boat and you don't slip, hit your head, and then fall into the water. This means that also you don't want to be taking super high jumps into water where you could potentially get knocked out and drown, or take some other form of damage that doesn't allow you to float or swim. This could also mean that you don't want to get into super cold waters or spend a long time in the water when it's very fatiguing. If you start spending upwards of 30-40 minutes in the water, you're going to get fatigued and you're going to be more likely to drown. There's plenty of reasons that people will drown in waters in national parks. The best thing that you can do from my research is that don't make stupid decisions, and that'll keep you out of 99% of drowning situations. Now, by this point in the video, you've probably noticed that it is very cold out. I'm dressed for cold weather. There's ice on the pond behind me, which leads me into my next point, hypothermia. In 2023 alone, more than 2,500 Americans died of hypothermia. If you ask any serious outdoorsman, undoubtedly they'll have 2 or 3 experiences where they got pretty close to being extremely hypothermic. This is because hypothermia is really just easy to get. If you're in really cold weather and you don't have a way to get warm, like a fire or getting in a car where you have a heater in there or anything like that, it is easy to get really cold really quick. I actually made a video on how to stay warm, and it'll be somewhere up here. I'll have it like linked in a tag or whatever they call it. I'm just gonna touch on it lightly. You need heavy clothing. This right here is a big wool jacket that stops the wind really good. You need a hat, you need gloves, you need good socks and good insulated pants. You gotta have good clothing, you gotta have a way to start a fire, you gotta have a way to get warm. Additionally, hypothermia and water go hand in hand. They're like brother and sister. If you get wet when it's cold out, you have to get dry as soon as possible or else you will die. Let's go get more wood for this fire I'm building. Ah, it doesn't look like a bad tree. Now, up there with drowning in motor accidents is falling. Falling is another pretty common cause of death in national parks, and really just any outdoor adventure. Now, this type of falling is not the kind like you just saw here, where I just simply tripped. People aren't dying from that. What they're dying from is getting very close to steep drop-offs. People fall. Usually this happens in a couple different states of mind. One, I want to get a really good picture, so I'm going to get dangerously close to this ledge, and then they trip and they fall. Or they get dangerously close to the ledge gives out, then they fall to their death. Some people think it's a good idea to try to climb rock ledges without a rope. I'm sure you can imagine where that one goes. Additionally, some people, and I have been almost a victim of this, can trip and fall onto sharp objects. Stumps and such can get very pointed if they've been worn down by animals, or sometimes when they break off, they just have a very pointed end to them. If you fall and happen to impale yourself on one of these, that can be dangerous. Fence posts can be another thing people fall and impale themselves on. How does one prevent this? Pretty simple. Don't get dangerously close to rock ledges, and don't try to climb up rock ledges that you can't and shouldn't. Additionally, if it looks like you can get down a spot to take a good photo or you want to explore an area, 9 times out of 10, you shouldn't go there because you're going to slip and fall and die. Another thing, make sure you inspect the ledge very, very carefully. I've seen this many times hiking, where there's a ledge, so on, like this, and then back here, about 5-10 feet from the end of the ledge, there's a giant crack that is formed, meaning that when you step on that, it's gonna give out and you're gonna go on a ride down the mountain. Another fun fact, you're actually more likely to be murdered by a person in a national park than you are by an animal. Alright, it's got too cold outside, so I put on my psych ward outfit, and I'm going to go over a couple more things you should keep in mind before you venture out into the woods if you don't want to die. Now, if you look at a lot of missing persons cases of people that get lost in the woods, the main issues that they run into is dehydration, lack of food, and then being able to survive the elements. So those are going to be the 3 main issues. Dehydration, number 1. How do you fix that? You carry around a water filter. Or you carry around a pot and a stove if you're in a snowy area. That way you can melt snow. Purification tablets and filters are important. I've gotten waterborne illnesses before by hiking in the mountains hunting elk. It's not fun. 2, not enough food. If you're hiking and you get lost, you're gonna want more food than you think you need. Generally, it's a good idea to pack a day's extra food than you think you'll be out. Last thing, weather. We've gone over a lot of different weather scenarios. The 2 worst are hypothermia, which we've covered, and hyperthermia, which is extreme heat, not extreme cold. It's what happens to the body during extreme heat, like heat stroke. To deal with this, getting in water, while not usually good, can help cool you down. Staying in the shade, resting during the hot parts of the day are going to be the main things you'll want to do. Another interesting thing is that in national parks, and over the past 17 years, according to this graph that I found, 50 people have died from poisoning. How can you avoid poisoning? Pretty simple. Have a good identification guide. And before you go sticking things in your mouth, make sure you know what you're sticking in your mouth. One thing I do think is worth mentioning is that there's also going to be different methods to how you get lost depending on your area. Now, what I mean by this is, if you look, the vast majority of missing persons cases in Alaska are actually from planes and plane crashes, versus the vast majority in like Yellowstone are going to be from people who just wandered off the trail. Now, I don't know enough about aviation and travel by aviation and bush plane to be able to give you good, solid, factual advice on how to survive a plane crash. I haven't done enough research, and I wouldn't want to give advice on something I don't know about. So I can't really help you guys there, but I can tell you that it would be worthwhile to research how people in the area you're going to often go missing so that you can be prepared for a similar situation. Another thing that you should consider is the fact that some groups are going to be at a higher risk of certain injuries and causes of death than others. For instance, hunters, I killed that buck. Hunters are going to be more likely to die from animal attacks than fishermen are. This is because hunters are usually walking around making animal noises or walking around with parts of animals on their back because they killed something. Fishermen are going to be more likely to drown than hikers are, right? Because fishermen are in and out of water. They have a lot more likelihood of bumping their head and falling into the water or getting dragged into the water by some other force. Hikers are going to be more likely to fall and die rather than hunters or fishermen. My goal for this video is pretty simple. I just want to help educate people on some of the potential dangers of outdoor recreational activities. By no means is this video about like fear-mongering people into not going outside into national parks. The actual rate of death to visitors in national parks is, I think, 8 in every 10 million visits. So like, before you go on that hike that takes you to a cliff edge, maybe think before you walk out onto the cliff. Now, if you guys want me to go more in depth on each of these areas, like hypothermia, starvation, dehydration, whatever, I will gladly make a video about each of those, because there's so much more to survival that I haven't covered in this video. This is just like covering as much ground as I can and some interesting facts along the way. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you can check out some of the other videos we got, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.